everyone, Jess here from the Scrappy Sisters, and I'm coming to you with an off-the-page design team layout for this month. I am creating these two cute little wall hangings that are going to go up on display in my craft room. So I was originally going to use embroidery hoops for this wall hanging idea, but I remembered that I actually have an old mobile that I had made for my son's room that had these two wool covered plastic circles that I then had hung the mobile bits off, and my son has since told me that he's a big boy and he doesn't need that up in his room anymore, and I just had it stashed in a cupboard. So for me, I thought, perfect, I'm going to use those two hoops. But for you, if you wanted to play along and do something similar like this at home, I would definitely just get some cheap embroidery hoops and use those for this, because I think it would make a really gorgeous effect to have the wood, the wood frame, so to speak, around these wall hangings. So I knew I wanted to use these gorgeous Pink Fresh Studios puffy thickers that say "Create Memories" as my sort of title, as the feature there of the wall hangings. I knew I wanted to get on as many of those super gorgeous Crafternoon ephemera pieces as I could that actually related to me, because I do want these to go on display in my wall in my craft room. So as much as I can knit and I do embroidery, or can do embroidery and things like that, it's not what I tend to do. They're not the things that I lean to. So I really wanted to pull out the bits and pieces that actually were more related to me and my crafting. Now, I don't paint. Even having said that, I don't paint, but I do use mixed media and watercolors and things like that in my scrapbooking. So I did like the idea of including those on the page as well. I knew I wanted to feature the beautiful florals that are all part of the Crafternoon section, especially in that gorgeous thicker book. There is so much in that thicker book that I love. So it is time for me to get started. So I'm kind of keeping them really similar, the two layouts. They're both having a tag and they're both having a doily as sort of the part of the backing, the main sort of base of the layout of the I'm going to call it a layout because that's just easier, each hoop. And so in the Memories hoop, the doily is coral, and in the Create hoop, the doily is yellow. So I'm really just trying to sync those two colors and make them complement each other as much as possible. Now for my project, I'm able to use quite a bit of white glue, PVA glue, for this project because the hoop itself is all covered in wool, and so wool will glue quite well. Like the adhesive will stick quite well between paper and glue. I think for a wooden embroidery hoop, you'd be okay with that as well, but do just have a think when you're creating yours, if you choose to create one, about what adhesive medium would work best for you. When I put on any foam dots between what's sticking to the paper and what's sticking to the side of the hoop, I need 3 layers of foam to have that match in height. So also be aware of that as well. I'm also matching up a couple of the flowers from the main cluster and just putting one piece of foam behind it, and I'm not sticking it perfectly exactly on top. I'm sort of wonking it out just a little, just to give a little bit of dimension and a little bit of lift and just a little bit of interest to that floral piece, just so it's not super flat. As this is going to be the wall hanging, I really want it to be dimensional, be textured, so it catches your attention as you're walking on past. So I'm going to stick on all the bits and pieces that I'm happy with. I know I started working on the larger hoop because I thought that would probably be an easier size to work with. It's so much bigger. I've kind of got more room to wriggle and more room to place things. So I just decided I would, work with the large one first. I'm really quite particular when I put down my thickers. I want to make sure that the font, the script, is sort of the way that they were intended, because I really like the style and the shape that they are on the page. So I'm just looking through the plastic to see the way they had it all lined up to make sure I've got it in a row. Now, a lot of people wouldn't quite be as particular as I am, but if you've been watching any of my videos, you will know that I am quite pedantic about things like that. So now it's time to work on the actual clusters using my Crafternoon ephemera. And I did actually find this a little more difficult than I thought that I would, because I knew I just wanted to put lots of bits and pieces onto the hoop, but I also didn't want it to be overcrowded and messy. So it did take me a little bit of time to sort of fiddle around and work this out. The general gist of the idea was fine, but the actual coming together of it was a little bit more challenging than I thought. I was really conscious of how much of that teal blue colour was happening on the page. I was also super conscious of too much yellow on yellow. So I'm really just trying to make sure I've got a nice spread of colours there, and that each piece of ephemera is getting its own time in the spotlight, for want of a better way of describing that. I decided I didn't need the little ball of wool that was part of that More Than a Hobby section, because, as I said earlier, knitting isn't really something that I do often. So I just decided I'd cut that off and copy the little fancy corners and just keep the More Than the Hobby text, because I think that's very cute and very much the way I think about my memory keeping. So again, just using my white glue to stick all this down, and it stuck really, really well against the wool. So I was really happy with that choice of adhesive for me. That worked really well. Here I am cutting my 3 layers of foam, because if I'm going to pop anything up from the side of the hoop, I need 3 layers of foam underneath it. That was very fiddly, but totally worth it because it added that stability that it needed. So definitely worth spending the time doing that. I was really excited to get started on this idea. Once I saw all the gorgeous ephemera, I knew that I wanted to feature it in my craft room somehow. And I was thinking about doing a 12 by 12 layout that I framed and put on the wall of my craft room. Perhaps using a cut file I'd seen around, an I created to create type cut file, but I just felt it had been a little bit overdone. I'd seen it quite a lot around YouTube and Facebook, and I wanted to try and do something that was a little bit different. And I'm desperately in need of giving my craft room an overhaul, so I thought this was a really nice thing for me to sort of inspire me to get going with fixing up my craft space, because I think a nice new wall hanging was just a nice way to motivate me to do something new. So just working now on the smaller hoop, and again, as I said earlier, I'm just going to mirror the same concept that's happening there on the larger hoop over on the smaller hoop. So a little tag, a little doily, and the heading create. I chose to cut the string really, really short on the tags, just to be a little bit of string showing through there, not a lot. It wouldn't be very stable if these were going to be moving around. It would probably come undone. So if you were going to be moving these a lot, you would definitely want some glue behind those little bits of string, but I don't plan on touching them once they're up on the wall, so I'm quite confident that they will stay perfectly fine. The adhesive I am using, the double-sided tape and the foam tape, is Kaiser Craft brand, specifically designed for scrapbooking and paper crafting, so happy with that. I buy those from Kaiser Craft when they have their monthly 50% off sale. I think it brings their foam tape down to like $1.50 or something, which is quite a reasonable price, I think. So when I started working on this smaller circle, I did find I had a little bit of trouble. I knew I wanted my large cluster over on the left-hand side, just the same as in the memory circle. But when I started trying to work on a cluster down below the E on the right-hand side, I started to find it quite difficult. It started to really overcrowd the hoop, and I was really struggling with where to put everything and how to do everything. But I found a really easy solution for it. So keep following along with my video here and I will tell you my simple solution for my overcrowding. I'm pretty proud of myself for realizing this before I had put too much ephemera onto my page, on my hoop. This is really out of the comfort zone for me. I don't think I've ever done an off the page creation ever. Not just for a DT, just in life. So I'm really happy with how they turned out. The same as with last week's cards. That's really unusual for me as well. I wouldn't have normally done gift cards. They're not something that is common for me to do either. So I'm really quite proud of myself for thinking outside the box and coming up with some different ways to use my craft supplies, because I don't know about you, but I just end up with so many craft supplies in my house and in my scrap room that it's really quite nice to achieve using some of them up. So I'm happy with that. So I don't know if you noticed some finger tapping going on. I'm starting to really wonder what I'm doing. I've got a little helper who wanted to touch my thickers there, wanted to know what they felt like. Forgot he came to give me a hand, literally. I can't wait till he is a little bit more patient and will sit down and actually do something crafty with me. His attention span lasts for about 3 minutes at the moment, so we don't get much done. He loves painting and he loves making a mess, and I'm more than happy to sit down and do that with him, but it'll be really nice when he can last a little bit longer than 2 minutes, or will let me do something next to him and not just do exactly what he's doing. We can craft together would be nice. I think my littlest child will be a little bit calmer. I think we'll wait and see as he grows. He seems to be a little bit more calm, and he is very much more of a mummy's boy than this one is. Very attached to his mummy, my little one. So we will see how that progresses. So I decided to work on that large cluster on the left because I was happy with that, but I am still struggling with the small cluster over on the right underneath the letter E. So I'm just putting it off at the moment and working on the things that I like. And I'm really questioning this small cluster underneath the E. And this moment here is when I realize, hang on, I've designed these to go next to each other. I don't need a small cluster underneath the E because the big cluster from the large hoop is there. Oh, I'm so glad I didn't fill that space, because then I would have had to mount these so much further apart than each other on the wall than what I actually would like them to be. So I'm really happy that I worked that out earlier rather than later. So I'm glad of that. I wanted them both to match each other with those little drawing pins to be holding the tags in place, but the light pink one on the coral background looked a bit funny, so I just had to swap those over. And I'm almost finished. I found the Oh So Pretty tag. I was hunting for that for ages. I was looking on the floor, I looked all over my desk, I looked everywhere. Turns out I thought it was scrap of double-sided tape and I threw it in the bin, duffer. I don't like this big white space that is left over from the white tag. I actually probably should have cut that white tag shorter, but I didn't in hindsight. So I'm just trying to work out how to cover this white tag because I don't love seeing such a large chunk of it. So I don't mind that small paint palette, but it's also already been used in the large circle. So I'm wondering whether to bother with the large paint palette or not. And I'm thinking I'll add some floral from off the sticker sheet, and I'm just popping that up on one little piece of foam. And I'm thinking that that's enough, that's all it needs there, but I will add a little bit more floral up underneath the buttons as well. So I'll just get another little piece of floral and a little piece of foam and fill in that space, that white space underneath the buttons. I'd really love to try and get a handmade sentiment somewhere onto these hoops, because that really is, again, the essence of my craft room. The things that I do in there are my handmade things. They're my time, they're my thing. But they're both just both of the handmade things are just a little bit too big for what I'm going for. So unfortunately they don't make it on the page. I also pulled across the little text that said "Maker's Gotta Make" because I really like that too. Makes me think of a Taylor Swift song actually, but that's another story. But it didn't make it on the page, so just sticking on my last little piece of floral, and then I'm pretty much done, and I'm really, really, really happy with how these turned out. I've got some close-up photos coming up for you so that you can see them in their element, and hopefully this has inspired you to do something a little bit different with your craft supplies. It doesn't need to be this afternoon collection. Anything that speaks to you, anything that sings to you that you want up on display, try and, think outside the box with. So thanks for stopping by, thanks for checking out my video today, and I will catch you next time with my next design team layout. Bye everyone.